Hello pupils, welcome to our Literacy Corner. You would have realized that in our literacy sessions, whether composition, comprehension, vocabulary, reading, or even for some other subjects like math, science, social studies, that the information has not always been presented in sentence form. Now, can you recall in what other way we have shared information with you? Well, as we continue today's lesson, we will learn about the interesting topic of illustrations. I'm Ms. Shamsuddin, and it's time for us to journey through our literacy maze. Now, have you ever heard the term illustration? What is an illustration? An illustration is a form of presenting information and ideas other than in words. One of the most basic type of illustration is the use of pictures. Pictures in the form of images send messages to the reader in the same way that words do. In short, illustration is a visualization made that explains something. The illustration does not have to be drawn. A photo in an encyclopedia, for example, is also an illustration because it explains what is written. An illustration, when used, can explain an idea even without the text nearby. People who look at pictures should see the story, read it as they would read the written text. To tell a story with an illustration means to convey some meaning, to explain a certain context only with the help of images. Now, there are different types of illustrations because there are various messages that we may want to send to persons. Now, let's learn about some of those types of illustrations and where they are used. Now, there are a lot of areas that require visualization. Here are some of those main types. We have editorial illustration, advertising illustration, and this one should be very practical to you. You know, advertising has to do with something to heighten or raise your appeal to want to buy something or want to participate in something. So a lot of times, just telling you it or you hearing it on the radio doesn't sound so exciting. But if you see an image, then you are most likely to become excited and really want to try the product that's being advertised. We have concept art, fashion illustration, technical or scientific illustration, infographics, and packaging illustrations. Now, there are some that we use very often and some that are not very relevant to us. While it is important in the world generally, there are some that we pay more attention to. For instance, editorial illustration. What is editorial illustration? An editorial illustration is an illustration created to better express an idea from the text, usually used in a book, magazine, newspaper, on the internet, or we say web source. This type of illustration can't live without text. So for instance, you're reading your book and you see a picture to go with the story. So that is what we refer to as an editorial illustration. Like the newspaper as well. There will be a story maybe about an accident or something. You will see a picture of the accident. So it draws you more to understand what exactly was happening. And now you want to read the news more in depth. You get a piece of what happened. Were there persons who died on the spot? Were there persons who were badly injured? How bad was the vehicle damage? Whatever kind of accident it was, the picture that is used can help to draw your attention more to it and help you understand the severity or the excitement that was in the moment of the event. Now, when we talk about infographics are a selection of images and diagrams with minimum text, allowing you to quickly understand the essence of the topic. Infographics are related to communication and graphic designs, but can also be attributed to illustrations. Good infographics makes it easier to understand information and a large amount of data. So infographic in itself uses less text and really focuses and depend on the image or the diagram that is used. Depending on the purpose, the publication, the audience, illustration can serve different purposes. Now, it means, why do we use illustrations? We can use illustrations to support narrative, that is, to support a story that is being told. Like I gave an example of a book, a storybook you might be reading, or the news. It can be used to reduce narratives. For instance, we have picture books. And you know picture books, they have very little writing because the pictures in itself or the illustration in itself is so explanatory. When you look at it, you can tell the story of how it's laid out. Emphasize key points. So let's say an important part of an explanation that you want to bring out, illustrations can help to do that. Visualize information. Like I said, illustrations can be used to bring out the high point of an event so you could understand how serious or how exciting the event was. Illustrations can also be used to summarize and simplify data, and as we go on, you'll see more of that. It can be used to break up text, enhance understanding, and add visual appeal. Now, the last two purposes of illustration, enhance understanding and add visual appeal, would speak to those of us who like to see things more than listen to them. So when we look at things, pictures, for example, diagrams, we are more likely to be engaged in the activity. We're more likely to learn and remember whatever we are participating in. Now, let's look at some tips to help us understand illustrations. Now, for picture illustrations are the most popular form of graphics used in teaching and learning. Pictures are used to accommodate text such as stories to help you, the reader, get an active experience. Now, children, have you ever picked up a book your teacher said you should pick up, and when you go through it, you see no pictures, you're like, oh, I don't want to read that? Yes, that's because pictures have its power of appeal for you. Now, pictures by themselves can be used to tell a story. Like I said, it can be used to emphasize a point. Pictures are very often match the characters and depicts actions of the characters. Like for instance, you might want to talk about what a boy was doing or what a girl was doing, what you and your friends were doing. You can get a picture to actually show or emphasize what you were doing in the moment. Then we have graphs and charts, which are used as illustration. Graphs are a common type of illustration that are used to present information such as numbers and other data in simplified form. So when we were talking about the purpose of summarizing and simplifying, graphs and charts is the way to go. Now, these two forms can be used to simplify or summarize large amount of data. Let's say, for instance, you had to do a research in your school to say what games the children in your school like, or to say what are some of the favorite subjects of the pupils in your school. The best way to present this type of information, instead of writing a long page of notes, numbers, and words, is to use graphs or charts. Now, graph shows information using numbers and lines. You must remember that. And I'm sure that you're well aware and acquainted with some of the different type of charts and graphs that we use. For instance, we have line graphs, bar graphs, pie chart, and pictographs. I'm sure that you know them. And now we look at the use of diagrams. Now, while you might want to say a diagram is a picture, it's different. It's quite different. Diagrams are graphics that displays an image, yes, but they are accompanied by either notes or labels. So diagrams are used to explain a concept or a method and describe objects or places. They can also show how things work, how they move, or how they change. Diagrams provide additional insight into subject displayed. They can be either symbolic, pictorial, or realistic. So if you look, you will see I have two diagrams here. The first one is a diagram of the, can you guess? It's a diagram of the heart. Now if you look, you will see that it is well labeled. It is labeled with all of the parts. So as you look at this diagram, there are arrows pointing to a specific spot or a specific location of the heart, and you have a label to tell you what is the name of that part of the heart. So there you have a diagram and how it can help you to understand the heart, and in a bigger context, the circulatory system of the body. Below, you will see that there is another diagram. This time, we do not have labels, but if you look carefully, you will see that there are arrows. Now, if we understand arrows and the direction of arrows, we would understand that the arrows are used to show us the process of the water cycle. So here the arrows is just showing us the route or the process in which the water would go, where the water is evaporated, then it forms into the cloud, and then it comes down. If you look, you see the arrow pointing down back to the ground. So it means it comes down back as rain. So it's quite simple for you to look and understand in a much easier way. Now, the use of illustration can make your reading and studying fun, as I said. Many times we have a page of notes and we get clustered with it. Illustrations such as pictures and diagrams can make that easier and fun. It is very effective for us to learn faster by looking at graphical representations instead of listening and following a page of words. It also allows for you, the reader, to select vocabulary to explain your understanding based on an interpretation. So let's look back at the water cycle. While there might be big words, or let's say not big words, but while there are words like precipitation and condensation and evaporation, you can also use simpler words that you're more au fait with and comfortable using to explain the water cycle. Now let's look at an example of a picture illustration used for composition writing. So if you were to use this picture, we would have to look at each picture, because if you look carefully, you will see that each picture has a number and it makes up the presentation on the page. Now you have to ensure that the events are in sequence. So when you look at the picture, you can tell yourself, this would most likely come now, no, this part isn't right, or yes, it's in the correct order. As it is here, these pictures are in order. Now, once you figure that out, you obviously would want to give the character's name, because you just can't look at the picture and said, oh, the man or whatever. You would want to give your character's name so that your story has more meaning and more life. Now we can use the pictures and the ideas that we've formulated to arrange appropriate sentences. So let's give it a shot. Now from this picture, the names I would use for the characters are Miss Pam and Pinker the pig. So Miss Pam and her pet pig, Pinker, lived alone on a farm after her husband died. Pinker loved being in the house with Miss Pam and keep her company. One day, Miss Pam was playing with her pet pig Pinker in the living room. Pinker loved to run and jump around. As he was running to the door, he saw Miss Pam crying out in pain. Pinker knew something was wrong and knew he had to do something quickly. Pinker ran through the open door and pushed the gate until it was open. As he ran, he kept thinking of what to do. Then he got a bright idea. He laid in the middle of the road and pretended that he was hurt or dead, hoping that someone would stop to help him. Then suddenly a car stopped and a man came up. The man moved quickly towards Pinker to give him help, when suddenly Pinker jumped up and started to make some strange sounds, and he walked back to the house. The man, thinking that it was strange, followed Pinker to the house, where he saw Miss Pam in pain on her chair. He quickly called the ambulance and stayed with Miss Pam and Pinker until the paramedics arrived. The paramedics said Miss Pam was having a heart attack and that the man called just in time to save her life. As they took her to the ambulance, she explained that it was Pinker who was the real hero. He was one smart pink that saved Miss Pam's life. Miss Pam was even more happy to have Pinker as her pet. Now there you see, if you looked at each picture, does the story match the arrangement of the pictures? Does it make sense? Do you think that you would have come up with a story like that, probably using some of the same ideas? Now I want you to review our lesson on graphical representations using charts and graphs and see how we use them to answer questions. Well, boys and girls, did you see how easy using those pictures was in helping you to build that story? Now I want you to look at this diagram and think about what it is telling us. Take 60 seconds to look at it. Now, if you were looking at it carefully, you would have realized that there are arrows drawn from one picture to the next. Can you figure out the information given? What most likely can we say is occurring in this diagram? Now, we can suggest that the arrows indicate what each animal will feed on. Because if we look at the grass and the grasshopper, what else can we see? Yes, the grasshopper lives, yes, among the grass. But what can we say about the snake and the frog and then the eagle? It has to be a pattern, a similar pattern. So we could say that the diagram here is showing how each animal feeds or the feeding relationship among these animals. Most likely, we will see a diagram like this in our science lesson. Well, pupils, I hope that you found this lesson on understanding how to use illustrations quite interesting. Remember that using illustrations is just another way to give information other than using words in sentences. Illustrations can be found in forms such as pictures, graphs, and diagrams. which are some of the most commonly used forms of illustrations. Stay safe and continue to follow us on the Guyana Learning channel on Facebook, YouTube, and our listed television channels. I am Ms. Shamshuddin saying goodbye for now.